Opern Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style.
Welcome to 3SN, everybody. I'm Alex Laverson, and with me is James. I'm the fantasy expert, Dotson. We are going over our top tight ends for the 2014 NFL fantasy season. Jimmy, how goes it?
It's going well over here. Another day, and another day closer to our fantasy football draft. Make sure you check that out when it's on there. Be up there in about less than a week. Man, I can't believe how time is flying here.
I know. I just can't wait for football to start. You know, I'm actually watching preseason games for once. I actually watched the Browns preseason game more than the Steelers preseason game because I wanted to see how Johnny Manziel performed. Yeah, this is going to be a special fantasy season, but we're going to be discussing tight ends, like I said earlier. And the thing is, when it comes to tight ends, Jimmy, I think this has to be the most cut and dry position out of all the positions there is in fantasy football. Do you agree with me?
I think at the top, yes. It's pretty obvious what to do early on in the draft with a tight end. The wild cards are when you get to, tight ends number 6 through 12 on the board, who the guy is who is most likely to go and make that splash that maybe nobody's expecting. Like a Julius Thomas from last year, but you cannot expect that to happen at all. You never really can predict it. I mean, I guess I did predict Julius last year, but even that, I'll be the first to admit it, I got as lucky as anybody else because he very easily could have been, a bust, like a Michael Wanui, who I thought also would have a good year. So you never really can tell who the best guys are going to be, but it's really obvious that at the top of our list, again, we come up with these consensus rankings based on our 3SN experts giving their rankings, as well as our customizable cheat sheets. We kind of take the average of those rankings and make a consensus pick. Obviously, number one, Jimmy Graham. He's basically a wide receiver, Alex. The question is, how high in the draft would you take him in that first round?
I think it depends. For example, in one of our leagues, we're going to have 16 teams. Now, if you're in a standard league with maybe only 10 or 12 teams, then you might be able to wait to get him in the second or the beginning of the third round. But I think if you're in a larger league, I would definitely look at getting Jimmy Graham if you're drafting later in the rounds. Only because, like you said, he kind of is like a wide receiver, and he's too good not to draft if you have him. And I know some people kind of squirm with the idea of taking a tight end, but this is a different kind of tight end here. Last year, put up 16 touchdowns, 1,215 receiving yards. And last year, this is actually considered, in a sense, a down year. This is how good this guy is. 9 touchdowns, 982 receiving yards. I mean, for a down year, I guess, that's actually pretty good. So Jimmy Graham is a special player, and I might take him earlier only because I don't want anybody else to have him. And I think there's such a gap between the top 3 tight ends and the rest of the tight ends in the league. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And I think if you're set on I want to build my team around Jimmy Graham, then yeah, Alex, you're going to have to go early. I've seen him go in mock drafts as early as 5 or 6, and I see him go there pretty consistently, actually. So don't be surprised if somebody takes a flyer on the tight end Jimmy Graham, maybe even before the first quarterback is taken, if you can believe that. It's scary to think, but it's very much the way of fantasy football now when you have wide receivers, or a wide receiver playing at a tight end position, which is what Jimmy Graham is. And that's really the thing. Next year, he might actually be listed as the wideout, not a tight end. So take the points while you can.
Exactly. And I think it's also a testament to how the game has changed the last decade. This is definitely a passing league. Tight ends, primarily known for blocking and passing secondary. Now you got someone like Jimmy Graham or maybe Rob Gronkowski who's catching balls first. And speaking of Rob Gronkowski, 2011, 18 touchdowns, 1,327 receiving yards, 90 receptions. In the last 2 years, plagued with injuries, not the same guy. Which Rob Gronkowski wouldn't get, Dotson, and how far do you put him in your tight ends?
It's all about how much you trust him. I mean, even playing only 7 games last year, he still ended up as like a top 10 or 12 tight end, which is great for those weeks that you have him, or it's great if you play in a league that you go that you just take your points for the entire league for the entire year. But when you're in a head-to-head weekly league, Rob Gronkowski is a huge risk, and just because of that, I got him actually as my number 4 tight end on the board. If he's healthy, he's right up there as 1A behind Jimmy Graham, no doubt in my mind. But I can't trust his health. I got to wait on him. I would take him, man, late 3rd, early 4th is probably about as early as I would go for him.
And that is the thing. It's which Gronkowski you're going to get. And if he's healthy, and that's a big if, and I'm hoping, this would be the 3rd year, since he's coming off that great 2011 season, that hopefully he's not injured. So I'm kind of reaching a sense that he doesn't get injured. And I'm hoping we get that 18 touchdown guy. So if he's perfectly healthy and, God, who knows if that's going to happen, I think he's the 3rd best tight end. Now,
well, here's the thing, Alex. Even if he's not healthy for the entire year, last year, like we said, he only played in 7 games. He had over 100 receiving yards in 3 of those 7 games. When he's on the field, he's getting the ball and he's getting beaucoup points for you. So, again, if you're in a league where it's not head-to-head, it's cumulative points, he's your guy for sure. If you're in a league where you can afford to take a risk on the tight end, definitely go for it because he'll be, for whatever weeks he's there, he'll be a solid player. Or maybe if you can even get a 2 tight end, a dual tight end system, so that if he does go down with injury, you can move your second tight end from a flex position up into the starting role. You got lots of possibilities if you want to go the Gronk route.
Oh, definitely. He's a special player. Yeah, look at the team he plays on, the pass-happy New England Patriots. When it comes to tight ends, and I guess obviously for any position, but especially tight ends, I really look for what kind of team they're on. Now, for example, Jordan Cameron's is listed in the top 5 for the most part in tight ends. And I am going to keep him there, only because I'm not sure who else to put in front of him. Maybe Jason Witten. But look at the year he had last year, 7 touchdowns, 917 receiving yards. And the Browns, you don't think of, high-scoring offenses when you think of the Patriots you do, and that's why you kind of put Rob Gronkowski higher. But you said you had Rob Gronkowski at your 4 best tight end. Now, who do you have in front of Rob Gronkowski, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, we have Jimmy Graham at number 1 consensus. Julius Thomas is the consensus all around at number 2, again, for obvious reasons after what he did last year. There's no way you can go against that. And again, you want to talk about pass-happy offenses. I don't think it gets much better than what Denver has right now. So he's definitely number 2 overall, and he's going end of the 2nd, beginning of the 3rd round in most leagues. Gronkowski is our consensus 3. I put him at 4 because I do have Witten at number 3. The reason I have Jason Witten, he is by far not a sexy pick at all. I'll be the first to admit that. However, what is he going to do? He will get you consistency points. Every day, every week, you're going to get a solid 60 to 70 yard performance, maybe a touchdown, maybe not. But either way, I'll take that 7 points from a tight end every week. I have no problem with that. I'd rather have that than to get, 11 points one week because he had 40 yards and a touchdown, and then the next week he only had 1 catch for 8 yards. That's not going to do me any good. I'll take the consistency of Jason Witten any day of the week. You can count on him. Go for him.
Excellent. Now that I think about it, I probably should put him ahead of Jordan Cameron. But, just to be different, I'll keep him there, I guess. But
well, here's the thing about Jordan Cameron. If whoever's going to be throwing the ball there, Brian Hoyer, we already know, loves Cameron. We saw it in his games last year.
I was just about to say, yeah, we don't know throw him the ball yet. If it's Hoyer, then I definitely think he is number 5 worthy.
Yeah, but even if it's Johnny Manziel, what position is the rookie quarterback going to look to first? Always does. It's his tight end. And when you have somebody talented like Jordan Cameron out there, that's going to be huge. And especially if there's no Josh Gordon, who's he going to throw the ball to? So there's lots of different routes you can go there. The other name that ends up in our top 5 that, I don't know, you're a little higher on him than I am, Vernon Davis. I guess he's just burned me a few too many times. He's one of those that he's like the opposite of Jason Witten. He can put up a 200-yard game with 2 touchdowns, and then the next 3 weeks have 30 yards combined. I guess I don't like that in the tight end. What is it about Vernon Davis that makes you go for him over, say, a Cameron or a Witten?
I think this is a reason most people aren't gonna, have for having a player stand out above the others. Vernon Davis is playing for a contract, and look at the year he had last year: 13 touchdowns, 850 receiving yards. This is a guy who's motivated. He's 30. He wants a new contract. He probably wants that one last final contract. And I think, at least in my opinion, if you're going to pick one or the other, Davis or Cameron, I'm going to go with Davis. And just the pure fact, it's kind of like he's on a roll almost. What have you done for me lately? Combined now with, he's playing for a new contract, I kind of put him higher above the rest. So I don't know if I'd say that's a reach, but I think he's consistent too for the most part. The year before that, he had 5 touchdowns, and the year before that, he had 6. I mean, not incredibly great, but he'd give you decent points either way. So I guess I'm just kind of expecting and hoping for big things out of Vernon Davis.
Now, here's the thing for me with Davis. Early in the year, when Crabtree was out, he had those games where, he had those 2 touchdown games. That's how he got his 13 touchdowns. I remember I traded for him late in the year, and I think he had less than 100 yards and 1 touchdown combined throughout the last 3 or 4 weeks. It was ridiculous how, Jekyll and Hyde Vernon Davis is. And when it comes to the tight end position, especially if I'm going to draft a guy that early, and a Vernon Davis would probably be about the 4th to 5th round in most leagues, I'm not willing to take a risk on somebody who, he might get me double-digit points. That'd be awesome. But I can't take a goose egg from him, and he did that a few too many times for my liking. Yeah, those 13 touchdowns are great, but look when they happen. Early in the year, not in the end of the year in playoff time. So maybe that's what keeps me away from him more than again, the Jason Witten. Not to mention, Jason Witten, 20 more catches than Vernon Davis. I know it doesn't sound like much, but that's an extra touch per game. And that's something that, especially when it's a consistent touches for one player versus very inconsistent for the other, I'll take the consistent 5 catches, 60 yards. That's just my preference at the position. It's all about your league and your own personal strategy and liking them.
Speaking of consistent, one consistent tight end, at least in my opinion, in terms of maybe putting up, maybe between 5 and 7 points a week is Greg Olsen, and that's why I have him as my number 7 wide receiver. And he's been lined up as a wide receiver this offseason. It looks like they're really trying to do some special things with him, maybe give him a bigger role. And he is also kind of a below average blocker, at least in my opinion. So I think he's one of those, I guess, primarily receiving fantasy receivers, if that makes sense. Fantasy owners could care less about his blocking skills. And, this is his shot, another career year in 2014.
I think you've hit it very well here. I mean, if you want to talk about, we always talk about tiering when it comes to fantasy football. Tier 1, by himself, Jimmy Graham, no doubt. Tier 2, I would put Julius Thomas and Rob Gronkowski because they're, depending on what Gronk's health is, that's the only reason he's even there. Tier 3 is where I'd put the next guys, especially with the consistency of Witten, the breakout potentials of Cameron and Davis. And then I'd put Olsen right at the bottom of that one because of his consistency. Like you said, 73 catches last year. That's something that is very tough to predict. But once you get past those top 7, so now you're in probably the end of the 6th, early 7th round, this is where things really start to get interesting. What do you do at that point? I would preferably wait and keep waiting until the very end to get a tight end, maybe somebody who I have my eye on as a sleeper. What's your thought process once, say, the top 7 have gone, you still are without a tight end, what do you do now?
After the top, like 7 are gone, I probably would wait only because, the production isn't going to be that much drastic. So, unless there's someone that's kind of overlooked, unless, Greg Olsen or Jordan Reed still, floating around there. I guess I'm kind of with you, only because it's not going to make that much of a difference. What's another point or two?
Yeah, and the thing that you might be able to sneak, I see Jordan Cameron, because of that quarterback situation, like you mentioned, he drops a little bit further in the draft boards than most of the experts like us predict him to. But, people are going based on their projections and based on, obviously, a quarterback situation that never bodes well for a receiver. However, we both think that he can be a star, whoever's quarterbacking. We saw it last year. So that's something to keep your eyes on there. Just to round out our top 10, we have at number 8, Dennis Pitta. Number 9, Kyle Rudolph. Number 10, Jordan Reed. And just to show 11 and 12, Martellus Bennett and Zach Ertz. Those would be lining up your standard 12-team league, who your starting tight ends would be. Now, I guess the question here, I mean, you can look at any one of them. Jordan Reed, you mentioned as the guy you like. He only played 9 games last year, only 13 the year before, so he's an injury concern. Who was the other guy? Dennis Pitta, coming off an injury, only 4 games last year. He's never had more than about 60, 65 catches in a year, so that's not exactly a, sexy pick. Martellus Bennett, already suspended this year. He could be great in that Chicago offense, but who knows what his availability is going to be, or if he's going to even come to play. Kyle Rudolph is a guy that is liked a lot. He's shown his potential, but he's coming off injury and probably with a rookie quarterback. So there's lots of question marks out there. Of those guys, which one, I guess, is the one that, I don't want to say it's the biggest breakout potential, but who's the one that seems to be most likely that you would take, Alex?
Breakout tight end. Oh, my God. Yeah, honestly, I'm not sure. I don't really see much of a breakout with any tight ends. Am I allowed to have that as an answer? Am I allowed
Yeah,
to have
you're allowed. So, I mean, I guess my question then would be, because of that, are you more likely to try to get one of those top tier, those top 5 or 6 tight ends as a result, knowing that it's so watered down at the end?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's
why I said draft Jimmy Graham higher than you can. You're not higher than you can. Draft Jimmy Graham a little higher maybe than you would expect.
Right. And I'm in agreement with you that I'm going to try to go after one of those top 4 or 5 guys in most leagues. However, I'm not going to make a reach for him. I'm going to still take my value picks the best I can, whoever I think is going to help me best. So if I do end up getting snuffed out of those top 6 or 7 guys, at that point I am waiting, and especially when I can see Martellus Bennett in the 12th round, or Kyle Rudolph in the 12th or 13th round where they're normally going, or even a guy we haven't mentioned yet. I am a huge fan of the rookie Eric Ebron up there in Detroit, having a, 6'5", 6'6" target at a tight end, especially when you have Golden Tate and, what's that guy's name? Oh, yeah, Calvin Johnson, to take away coverage from him. I have a feeling that Eric Ebron could be a 8 to 9 touchdown scorer, and if I can get that many touchdowns in the, say, 14th round, which is about where he goes, if he gets drafted at all, that's, I'll take that any day of the week.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it seems like the tight ends is a really, almost in a way, underlooked. This is probably one of the positions that you should really think about, too, because I think most people aren't going to take tight ends very seriously. And so this is kind of a curveball.
There's so much emphasis on those running backs and wideouts. I don't blame them. But at the same time, if you do take a Jimmy Graham in the first round, the question ends up being, how much have you potentially weakened your team in terms of not being able to get one of the top tier running backs or wideouts? That's the risk and reward that you need to look at.
I would not take Jimmy Graham over one of the top tier running backs. But like I said earlier, if you're in a big lead at the end of your draft, let's say you're drafting number 16, all the top running backs are gone. This is when you start thinking, maybe I should take Jimmy Graham.
All right, here's my question for you. You're in the middle of the first round, pick 6 or 7. All the picks in front of you have been running back because that's pretty traditional. You're almost always going to see the top 5 or 6 running backs go first. You have the option. You can take the top quarterback, Peyton Manning, or you can say Breeze or Rodgers if you want. You can take the top wide receiver, Calvin Johnson. You can take the top tight end, Jimmy Graham. Which route do you go?
Probably Peyton Manning, my top quarterback.
You build your team around the quarterback, which I can't blame you at all.
I know you're not that big on doing that, right?
I'm going to say that's tough. I mean, if I can see Peyton there, it's tough not to take him. I would honestly, out of all that, I might go with Jimmy Graham over all of them because I know I can get solid wideout number one's potential in the 2nd and 3rd round. I know I can get a quarterback who's going to give me solid points throughout the year as late as the 9th and 10th round. And you've seen on my posts here on 3SN, you'll check our draft strategies about the quote-unquote no running back draft strategy, that I have no problem taking my top running back in the 6th round. So I'm definitely between Calvin and Jimmy Graham. I might go Graham over Calvin, and I know that sounds crazy, but
look,
he's just that much better.
Here's the thing, though. how many touchdowns are you guaranteed with Peyton Manning? Probably around 40 to 50 some. With Calvin Johnson, you could have 2,000 yards, maybe only 5 touchdowns again. Maybe the same thing with Jimmy Graham. You're going to get so many touchdowns with Peyton Manning, unless you're in a league where there are only 4 points of passing touchdown. I don't see why you would pass up Peyton Manning. It's all about
right.
touchdowns.
Well, you said it right there. You got to know your league. If it's a standard league, no doubt in my mind, I'm between Calvin and Jimmy Graham. If it's the 6 points equivalent, all touchdowns, 6 points, then I'm looking a lot more heavily at Peyton Manning. But at the same time, I highly doubt that no quarterback's gone in the first 7 picks in that type of league. But hey, you never know. So again, rule number 1, you got to know your league. Now, one last final piece of tight end draft strategy that you can look at. With the flex positions, we talked about possibly doing the dual tight end system. I like drafts where you can get maybe Jimmy Graham or Julius Thomas early and then getting one of those middle tier guys, the Wittens, the Camerons, or Davises. I think that can be a very good strategy for you. However, if you don't go with the dual tight end strategy, if you get one of those top tight ends especially, or even if you just wait until the very end, get one tight end. Don't worry about getting a backup tight end because you're A, not going to play him, B, they're not going to get you enough points to be worth anything, and C, you're going to find a better guy on the waiver wire anyway. So unless you're going for the dual tight end strategy where you have 2 guys starting almost every week, don't worry about getting the backup tight end.
I agree. Now imagine if you could pull off something like getting Graham and Gronkowski. That would be special.
Well, check out on our website. We have our different draft strategies, and right on there is the dual tight end system where it's very possible to get Graham in the first, Gronk in the third, without too much difficulty, honestly, and you can still build a very solid team around him.
But I think that wraps it up for this edition of our fantasy football rankings with tight ends. And any other thoughts before we call it a night, Jimmer?
No, sir. Just make sure you keep coming back. Make sure you keep checking all of our draft strategy options that we have for you. Again, those cheat sheets are available on our website, 360sportsnetwork.com. Make sure you're on there because that's the best way to get yourself a fantasy championship.
Absolutely. You guys can reach us at 3S Network, 3SN Lab, and 3SN Dot. So reach us on Twitter. All right, well, that about does it. So I hope everyone has a good night. And if you're still in high school, hopefully this will cheer you up because school starts pretty soon and you guys are probably severely depressed like I used to be. So that should be it, and I hope you all have a good night.